Daniel Kaplan, Sports Business Journal. Now, this is a pretty timely conversation. One of the reasons I wanted to bring him onto the show, I'm fascinated by this whole AAF thing.
Was Tomey a trade or a free agent signing? Refresh my memory.
That was a free agent signing.
Pretty good one.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
This whole AAF thing has been fascinating to me with the ratings and the money and the business behind it, but it kind of morphed right into what just happened with Bryce Harper signing with the Phillies. And I'm interested to get Daniel's take on that. And 13 years, $330 million, Daniel, sports business. What kind of business is bringing in a free agent of that magnitude to a team?
Well, it's all about selling tickets and our regional sports network ratings and selling advertising on that regional sports network. I mean, that when you bring in a star, it's not. I mean, yes, it is to win games, but it's also to sell tickets, sell sponsorships, sell advertising, cut a bigger TV deal. That's what it's about.
So along those lines, Daniel, so the Phillies, they have a relationship with NBC Sports Philadelphia, who carries their games. How does this compare to, say, a team like the Yankees that has their own network and makes, I guess, almost 100% of the profits from that, compared to what the Phillies can make off of signing such a star player?
Well, first of all, the Yankees currently own 20% of the YES network. They're probably seeking to buy. Will seek to buy the rest of that back. It's caught up in the whole Disney sale of the RS, the regional networks. But either way, whoever owns the channel, the sports network, they need to draw in TV ratings to be able to charge more for advertising, sponsorships, things of that nature. And if you have a dull team that's not winning many games, it's harder to do. If you have Bryce Harper, that people are going to tune in to see that. So I mean that's what it's about. Someone did the economic calculation that it's this is a worthwhile investment to invest that much money in one player. I think a lot of people will have doubts about that.
Daniel Kaplan, Sports Business Journal. The impact of adding a player like that. Most teams see the economic windfall almost immediately too, right? The season tickets will go up, jersey sales, all of that.
Yeah, usually the biggest boon are in the early years. Often, as we know, the players don't perform well in the outer years of the contract. We saw that with Alex Rodriguez in New York in particular. So, time will tell if this is a worthwhile investment, but I have no doubt that in the early years it should pay off for the Phillies, whether they make the World Series or not.
Yeah, we saw last year, Daniel, that the Phillies were a very competitive team for, 3/4 of the season, but they really struggled still in the box office and getting people at the stadium. I have to think that that's going to change, that the star power that the Philly fans were clamoring for is going to get them in the seats, and then that's obviously will benefit them immensely in being able to bring revenue in.
That's the hope, clearly. I mean, if it doesn't, it's a big bust. But I would imagine having a star of Bryce Harper's stature will definitely jack up attendance. And he's not the only free agent signing, clearly, for the Phillies this year.
I know when you look at sports and business, do you see a bubble bursting at some point for a sport like Major League Baseball? You look at and say, is the popularity there? Is it a regional sport? I mean, are they still making I guess they are. It just seems that the sport is not quite as popular as it used to be, yet the salaries are still skyrocketing here. And I wonder if there's a time that you envision in any of the sports, football, NBA, even hockey, that, hockey had their moment where the bubble bursted. Do you see that happening in baseball or any of the sports, down the road, shortly down the road?
Well, I don't know about shortly, but there's been talk of a bubble in sports for many years, and it's never proved out. We all know there's been fragmentation of media distribution, and that actually has helped sports because there's more clamoring for must-see content, live content that can't be put off watching. So that helps sports. There's no doubt baseball has struggled with an aging fan demographic. And I do question some of these large contracts. I'm with you. I think baseball has a problem attracting a younger demographic because the younger demographic has attention deficit disorder. Baseball games are too slow, too long. I mean, if you ever watch the Yankee Red Sox games, it's like watching paint dry sometimes. It goes 4 or 5 hours. It's insane. So I do think baseball has a problem. They are trying to speed up the game. The pitch clock, things of that nature. I still think they need to dramatically overhaul the game to, maybe reduce pitching substitutions. I mean, at 6th, 7th inning pitching substitutions, I mean, everyone groans. It's 5-10 minutes before the next pitcher comes in. Baseball really needs to get a handle on that.
So I don't know if the information is public or researchable, but I don't know if you're even saying this, but are you wondering if maybe owners in baseball are taking less ROI over the past few years just to make sure that they're still getting stars and trying to make the game relevant and keep these superstar salaries inflating?
Well, you have to look at overall salary, not just a few high-profile ones like Manny Machado,
right.
Giancarlo Stanton. It's sort of like the NFL. You've seen some huge contracts, but at the middle and lower end, it's not as much. There's still a lot of free agents in baseball on the sidelines. The biggest gripe of the Players Association in baseball is that there's not enough spending. You've seen the argument is that many teams that aren't trying to win. Phillies are not in that category, clearly.
Right.
But there are a number of teams. I mean, look at South Florida with the Marlins as a joke. They've stripped down, sold off their assets, and they're not spending money. So there are a number of teams like that. So if you looked at overall salary spending, I would be surprised if you'd seen much of a bump year to year.
Daniel Kaplan is with us from the Sports Business Journal. Now, this story of the AAF has me fascinated. I think it's unbelievable. Now, you had talked to the owner, Tom Dundon, who put that $250 million investment into the league. Now, there is some disagreement on what this actual investment was. You actually talked to him, and he told you a little bit more about that $250 million. Because some people look at this and say they needed $250 million in week 2.
Yeah, he basically apologized for how it was put out. He did not invest $250 million. Not even close. The $250 million is the number he says he would put in over many years if they aggressively expand. So they have 8 teams. He floated the number of 32. So over, say, just taking a period of time, 5 to 10 years, things are going well. They're expanding. Ratings remain high. They quadruple the number of teams. Then maybe he needs to spend $250 million. But it's not as if he wrote a check for $250 million last month or this month and acquired the league. He acquired the league. He won't say for how much, but it's not $250 million, and not even close.
So he essentially purchased the league for an undisclosed amount, and then on top of that believes that it needs another $250 million worth of investing should they do these certain things that he would like to see them do?
Right, and now let's have the different scenarios. Say ratings plummet. Say when the XFL comes on next year, it's too much competition. Say fans don't show up. He'll pull the plug. He'll do that. So then that $250 million doesn't get put into the league. But in talking to people about startup football leagues, 250 is generally the starting point that most say is necessary to keep one of these leagues viable for 3 to 5 years before you hopefully hit profitability. So it's a lot of money necessary to start a football league. It's not a coincidence, that $250 million figure. I've heard it before.
What? Let me ask you, in terms of making money, how does the AAF make money? Where is their main source of income to keep this? Because ratings almost, yes, it matters, but they don't have a TV contract like the NFL does. Like, they're not paying the AAF fully to be on those networks. They might have a barter deal, right?
Well, they're not making money. I mean, the idea is that, like any startup, it could take 3 to 5 years to reach profitability. I mean, Amazon didn't make money in its early years, so no one is expecting the AAF in year 1 to make money, not by a far stretch. But the fact Dundon came in and is agreed to acquire the league and is willing to fund it, at least for the foreseeable future, That's significant because I had heard a lot of rumblings about missed payroll, shoddy insurance. The team in Florida has to have the practices be in Georgia to qualify for workers' comp in Georgia because they couldn't get it in Florida. So there were a lot of problems with this league. I had fully expected to get steamrolled by Vince McMahon and the XFL next year. Now I'm not so sure because Dundon is a serious player as well. Perhaps they merged because there's clearly not a market for two spring leagues. One of them has to survive, and perhaps they merge down the road.
How viable is expansion? Most of the teams in AAF are in cities places that don't have NFL teams. But you mentioned maybe they can get, or if they're figuring they can double their size and then maybe add more. How viable is that?
Well, that's the $1 million question, or maybe the $250 million question. They think it's viable. They think there's a demand for it. The TV ratings have been decent. Their NFL Network says the ratings in that time slot are up 450%. The AAF games versus what was on the previous year. So there's no doubt in this media ecosystem there's a demand for live sports content. People love football. On the other hand, sometimes watching these games with no one in the stands, I find it a little depressing.
Yeah, you're right. It seems that it's going to be. Let me ask you about. You mentioned ratings. Do the television networks have a certain? Would you deem that these have been ratings successful in the early stages? They seem to be growing the ratings, right?
Yeah, they have been ratings successful in the early stages. I think some people are surprised the rate. I think a lot of people thought they'd get a decent rating in week 1 and it would tail off in weeks 2 and 3, and that did not occur. You're right. I wouldn't call it a barter deal. It's more of a time-buy deal where it's a common procedure with startup leagues and other sort of mid-tier sports to buy your way onto either network or cable television. You go to say an ESPN or a TBS or CBS and say, we want to air our product, our sport for 3 hours. What will it cost to get on the air? The network or cable operator sells you the time, and then the entity sells the advertising itself. So that's almost surely what's going on with AAF games.
Really interesting stuff. Daniel Kaplan from the Sports Business Journal as the AAF, very interesting and then very timely with this big news today. 13 years, $330 million, no opt-out for Bryce Harper. Daniel, we appreciate your time.
Okay, thanks a lot.